All right, welcome back to Aesthetic Appeal, the official podcast of Aesthetic Brokers. Today, to get into the Christmas spirit, we are going to be doing 12 questions for Bill.
12 questions, 12 days of Christmas. All right, I'm ready. Let's go.
All
What do we got?
right. So, the first of the 12 questions. When you run workshops for med spas and aesthetic clinics, what do you actually enjoy about that process?
One of the things that I find most enjoyable about running workshops is it gives you a chance to meet people in person and you get to hear their stories of just how they got into the wellness and aesthetic space. And I think for us, when you can get a sidebar conversation with a cup of coffee, you learn a lot about not just the content of a practice, but the character of the people who lead it.
That's a great point. It actually leads into my next question. So, what do you think are some of the hidden benefits of a workshop?
Well, one of the hidden benefits of doing a workshop in person is that you get to collaborate with other owners and you don't feel like you're on an island. I think far too many times owners are really smart and they have to make all of the decisions. And sometimes it helps hearing a question come from somebody else in the audience that's dealing with a similar problem that you might have been. But until it comes out of somebody else's mouth, you don't realize that, oh, that's something that I'm dealing with too. And it's been on the back burner, but now I'm going to be able to address it. And they had a really great response to how they fixed that issue in their own practice.
That makes total sense. What are some intangibles about doing a workshop that a lot of aesthetic brokers clients feel they enjoy?
Well, I think it goes back to a theme that we've talked about in the past, which is the collaborative mindset. The best idea wins. And so I think when you can get together with more than one person and talk about the issues that you have, we see so many sets and reps of practices across the country. There's usually an example that we've seen that something worked well in a practice, and maybe you haven't thought about it yet as an owner. And so I think that's one of the benefits that a lot of our clients see when we do a workshop with them.
What do the strongest med spa owners have in common when you meet them in person?
The strongest med spa owners have one thing in common whenever I meet them in person, and that is they're engaged. Med spa owners who are engaged in a personal conversation are the same type of personality that are engaged in their day to day operations. And that drives success, undoubtedly.
I'm definitely with you on that one. So, what signals tell you a business is scalable versus just busy?
One of the key indicators that I use to determine if a business is just busy or if it's scalable is I look at the speed at which providers fill up their schedule. It's not necessarily the fact that your providers are full on their calendar or they're near full on their calendar. Whenever you incorporate a new service line or you bring in a new provider, the speed at which that particular service or that particular person comes online and ramps up is an indicator of what you need to do to maximize the scale of that person.
Yeah, that's a really great point.
One thing I would offer that a lot of people don't realize is that speed is life. And so when you spend marketing dollars, when you spend money on rent, you expect those things to pay off. And so when you bring in a provider that is well received and imparts education on your patients, and they respond to that education by really doing the full treatment plans that they need to, that's an indication that you need to give that person more time on the schedule. And that creates an imbalance in the workflow. And so that will require more than just a simple rescheduling and reshuffling of the deck for talent. It becomes an item where you're saying, this is scalable. How do I teach those things to the team? And then how do I expand our footprint on top of that?
Yeah, that's some really great insight. It leads me to my next point, which is what do you usually look for first? The numbers, the patient flow, or the team dynamic?
Team dynamic is the number one thing that I look for first when you're looking at a batch of questions of where do we start with? Because team dynamic really essentially boils down to your culture. And I always define culture as how people treat each other when you're not around. And so teams that have a dynamic that you can feel the energy, the positivity, the uplifting movement when you're not around define a great culture. And that's what you want because you can't be everywhere and everybody at all times.
Yeah, that's a really great explanation. What size med spa would you think is too big or too small to do a workshop with you?
Ooh, a great question. So I would say one of the best indicators of am I in the right size practice to do a workshop that is meaningful probably about $2 million to $12 million of revenue in sales a year is a good window for you to think about that a workshop can be beneficial. Below that, I always steer our clients towards Jessica Hunter, the head of consulting, because you're on a growth plan with her on a monthly basis to really get you ramped up and operating at near full capacity. Where I think we become more beneficial in a workshop is we help you lean out and help you increase your revenue at the same time. It's like a dual hat effect. And that starts the process of a multi-year exit strategy plan.
What parts of what parts of workshops end up shifting the owner's mindset the fastest?
I think one of the things that sets the wheels in motion for an owner when they come to one of our workshops, a big takeaway is there's so many levers that you can pull to produce excellence and to actually deliver better results for yourself. One of the quickest things that you can see the effects of is personnel incentive restructuring, making sure that your people are completely aligned with your goals through an incentive based solution. That's going to drive results the fastest more than anything else.
Thank you. When you walk into a clinic for the first time, what are the top things you're scanning for immediately?
I'll tell you what, the number one thing that I look for when I walk into a clinic, I'm looking at patient treatment. And I don't mean when they're in the chair. I'm looking at when someone comes through the door, how are they greeted? What are the sights? What are the sounds? What are the smells? Who is the person that touches them first? Who does the handoff? How does that handoff go? How are they educated when they're in the treatment room? What is the protocol for them coming out? How do they feel by the staff when they come out of their treatment? And then, most importantly, carrying that sense of satisfaction and pride out the door with a booking to follow up for follow on treatments that they need to incur, and making sure that they're walking out the door armed properly with the right products to protect the treatment that they just had done.
So, I wanted to follow up on one of the questions I asked earlier, and you mentioned patient experience. So, what did you mean by how a patient is handled? How should they be treated when they walk in the door and even before they walk in the door?
So, you bring up a great point, Megan. I think one of the things that doesn't get talked about enough is what is the stage being set as for someone to come in to the practice? And I think one of the ways that you can control that environment is through brevity of message, being on point in the delivery, whether it's an email, a phone call, or a text, and ensuring that it ties into a reminder that they're coming in on this day at this time. Maybe it's to follow up on something that they've already had done. And maybe it's to clearly sit down and do a refresh of their neuromodulator that they had 3 months ago. Any way of tying in what you know about the patient to that appointment at that time is a really great way to control the narrative of this is what they're coming in for. And oh, by the way, it's an easy way for you to say, we're looking forward to seeing you again tomorrow at 3 p.m. Megan will be your provider. She is excited to see you and wanted to make you aware that if we're following up with a neuromodulator treatment and maybe a laser skin therapy treatment, we just had holiday specials come in on these products. You can ask more about them at the desk. And that sets the stage of, okay, I know that I should probably be purchasing some sort of additional skincare because I'm getting this treatment that is a non-cyclical nature.
Yeah, so in that same vein, when they first come through the door, who should be the first person talking to them and how should they treat them?
Well, I think the right answer is that your front desk people, whether they're a client experience manager, whether they are someone who is a greeter, is a super bubbly, positive, warm person that's easy to relate to. And so, whoever that person is, that's the best person because they're coming in excited that they get to come in and do something for themselves that's improving how they feel, how they look, how they perform if you're in a wellness clinic. And so, whoever that person is, you want that person to be on point because that's the first individual that represents who you are as an owner and as a business.
Yeah, I completely agree. Anytime I've gone into an appointment and had a great experience at the front desk, I've always wanted to come back. So It's definitely one of the most important parts of the customer service experience.
Right. And think about it. That sets the stage for them to credential the next person in line, right? And so as your provider comes up, who you may know, right? We know our providers who help us on a periodic basis. Sometimes you may not know the provider because it's an irrelevant point who provides the service because all of the people in the practice are trained the exact same standard and acumen. And so it's really important to really credential the personality of the person. Is if your practice is one of those practices that isn't injector famous type of people in the background. The next thing that really people overlook is credentialing the human side of who's going to be providing the treatment that day. And that is a great way to warm up the handoff of, okay, I feel an identity attachment to this person. I know what they like. I know their background. I know their education. And I know something about them that is endearing that I can hold on to as we go back to the treatment room.
Yeah, and it's crazy how these small little things within your providers can make such a big impact in your business.
Yeah, absolutely. Once they get into the room, it's a very trusting, intimate experience, right? It's usually you and your provider.
Yeah,
And so the provider is going to prepare themselves to know what treatments you've had in the past as a patient. But the client isn't always going to prepare themselves on looking at the background of their provider if it's a new
exactly.
provider for that particular visit.
Yeah.
And so having somebody credential them while they're filling out their paperwork, while they're checking in, oh my gosh, Megan's fabulous. I've looked through your record and you haven't had Megan as your provider yet. But let me tell you, like, she's a transplant from Boston and she's been with us for the last several years and she's phenomenal. And she went to school here and got her nursing degree there. And she's been an injector for us for this long. And you'll love her because she loves dogs and she's got a dog too. And I know that you have one. Right now, there's like, oh, she loves dogs. I have a dog. Megan, I heard you have a dog. Like your patient's coming into you with open arms. Megan, I heard you have a dog. Oh, I just got a brand new puppy. And that is a great quick way to establish commonality for the best practices.
Yeah, just those little things make the biggest difference.
Yeah.
And that wraps up our 12 days of cheer of our med spa questions for our CEO, Bill Walker. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you have a very happy holidays.
Thanks, Megan.